Well, hey, Dave, I'm so excited to have you join me today to talk about Fight Veds. I mean, you're such an awesome person, and you and John both. I love you both so much, and I'm really excited to have you share what you're doing with Fight Veds here on the YouTube channel. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. But yeah, my name is Dave DeMasi. I lead a nonprofit in the vascular Ehlers-Danlos community called Fight Veds. Our website is www.fightveds.org. And very excited to tell you about all that we do and all the exciting things that are going on in the vascular Ehlers-Danlos community, because honestly, it's, in my opinion, one of the most exciting and promising times that those of us who have been around this community for a while have seen in quite a bit.
Yeah, I totally share that excitement with you. I don't think the last few years have just been this build of it, like more and more and more. And now it's like reaching a peak where we got clinical trials, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So why don't you tell me more about what Fight Veds does?
Sure. So Fight Veds is a website, and it's a nonprofit organization that we founded about 5 years ago. The mission really has three pieces to it. Number one is to provide education to patients in a way that patients can understand. Number two is genetic testing, trying to provide access to low-cost genetic testing for patients who maybe can't get it through other means. And then thirdly is about advancing research. I think it's something, John, who as a physician could speak the language of patients, really important. And it's, part of our mission to make sure that it's a website that gives people access to the information, the testing and those things that maybe if you're not in the medical community, maybe feel a little bit distant or hard to wrap your arms around.
Yeah. And there's some exciting research coming up too. And so genetic testing is a huge piece too. And I want to hit that again, because I think a lot of people have trouble sometimes getting that genetic testing for vEDS. And when we're talking about clinical trials and research and getting tested, I mean, there's such an important background piece there connecting those two things. Can you tell us more about how Fight Veds kind of creates that link?
Yeah, sure. And actually, even starting with kind of the first piece of kind of providing information, this is how we got into the genetic testing part of this as well. So when we first started 5 years ago, really the mission was about, let's get this information, let's distill it down in a language that patients can easily consume. And we put it up on the website. So if you go there, you can find a bunch of information about things like treatment, what the condition is, how to put together a care team. But naturally, one of the biggest questions that we were seeing as people were coming through was, do I have it? It's the obvious next question. And so the hard part about it was the genetic testing, even at this time, which was, like I said, 4 or 5 years ago, in particular, if you go back even further than that, is very difficult to access genetic testing, and still is a little bit today. Mm-hmm. But if you go onto GoFundMe and Kickstarter, you'll see a lot of these campaigns that are still up there that are very sad, where people are going to try to raise a couple $1,000s, can't see a geneticist, can't get the testing, very difficult to do. And we looked at it and we realized what was going on in genetic testing broadly and how it was becoming easier, faster, and more affordable. And to be clear, we don't provide the genetic testing. That's not what we do. We work with the leading genetic testing labs to try to figure out what are ways that patients can get tested for vascular Ehlers-Danlos in the fastest, cheapest, and most supported way possible. And so we started to work with those labs to try to understand what is the process, what's the best way to do it. And so if you come to Fight Veds and you can click on the top right and go to genetic test, you can enter a little bit of information and we'll send you the information step by step for how you go and get tested by a leading genetics testing lab. You can do it from home. You don't need any sort of provider or meet with a geneticist. It can still take a lot of time to go in, or a genetic counselor. It can take a lot of time to get those types of meetings set up. So for those folks who need it, you can come and do it. And through our website right now, if you follow that patient pay option, the cost is about $375 within the US, and it can vary a little bit, I think, based on maybe taxes, but it's around there. If you have insurance, you can still go through it and do this. And a lot of times it costs just the copay, about $50. And that includes meeting with a genetic counselor, understanding the options, getting the test ordered, having someone there on the other side of this. If you come back with something positive, if it's vascular Ehlers-Danlos or a related condition, because this tests for related conditions as well, someone there to kind of talk to you about what this means, connect you with, that you obviously know Fight VEDS because you've come through there, but the VEDS movement, things like that, other resources that are in the community. The one other thing I'll mention is we're in pretty late stage conversations with the genetics testing lab about ways to even reduce this cost even more. And as you mentioned, this ties into the idea of research, but before we even get there, we want to lower the cost even further from where it is in that $375. And so stay tuned. There's, this isn't kind of refined yet, but we're trying to take a little bit more off of that. And we'll have more information. If you subscribe to Fight VEDS, we will be letting everyone know. And if you are watching this video later, just come to the website and hopefully we've got that program going. But our idea is just, if you want to know that you have it, we don't want the whole barrier around the testing process, going to the lab, getting if you can't get in to see the provider, we don't want that to stand in the way of you getting an answer on this important question.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, because it's such a stressful time, like that period of time, like trying to get a genetic test. If you're not one of the people who like had an emergency and the doctor just decided to order it, sometimes this path can be so stressful. And then you run into all of these barriers that it sounds just really awesome. Can you mention too, you mentioned that it would be like $375 in the US. Is there pricing for outside the US, or are you currently US only?
Yeah. So patients outside the US can come and get testing as well too, through the website. So the price, it may vary a little bit based on shipping, but the US dollar price, I think, remains consistent. In some, now the lab that does it doesn't cover all geographies. So if you come and aren't able to get it done through geography, we have a couple different options. So you can also feel free to send a note on the contact us portion of the page saying what country you're from, the fact that you've looked into it and aren't able to get it. We've been able to, and we've had help kind of across the globe, really. We've got great stories of folks who came to us. We helped them to get testing. And then if they have positive diagnoses, the good news about this community and the stuff that you do, Katie, and a lot of others, is there are a lot of resources out there. But we're also, like to be hands-on, and we've helped, John worked with the genetic counselor kind of in our community, someone from the vEDS Collaborative, which those of you who are in the community know about the work that Katie, you, me, John, and did on the vEDS Collaborative along with Dr. Byers and Dr. Schaub, but worked someone from the collaborative to find a genetic counselor in Spain and a provider in Spain and one in Australia who knows how to do this type of stuff. So definitely a lot of our stuff can be US focused because that's where we are. And, a lot of the rules and the regulations around things are based in the US. So we talk about, FDA trials and things like that, but we definitely want to help people across the world. And so if we can be helpful, we definitely want to, and we will be helpful, particularly if you come back and you have a positive diagnosis. Don't hesitate to let us know, and we will make sure to get you set up in the right way.
That's really wonderful that you're providing this resource for people. And I love that note. Don't hesitate to reach out. So even if you think you might not be able to help or something, there's a possibility that you can, and reach out, and Dave will see what he can do and work his magic. You mentioned clinical trials in there again. So how does this support clinical trials? We're in such a crazy, exciting time right now with clinical trials in the works. Tell me more about how this supports that.
Yeah. So when we started, again, the website, we always knew that our goal was to try to support research, and it's a big part of what we did. And even actually before we started fightveds.org, we raised money, or giving, to, Dr. Milowitz at UT Health System. We had done some things in terms of setting up what's now become an annual, or, COVID has kind of, changed things in terms of the annual meeting, but the annual kind of researchers meeting, we worked with the University of Washington, Dr. Byers, to set up the first one that we did in Chicago in, I believe, 2015, to bring all the researchers together to try to share information. This is something that they're now doing relatively frequently. So that was always, supporting research was always a part of what we did. And then after that point, we thought one of the places we could be most helpful is in trying to proactively engage biotechs and pharmaceutical companies to let them know, hey, this is an area where you should be spending your time and hopefully your money, because we've got an active patient population. There's a real need here. We would actually create kind of a packet of information. We were kind of cold emailing, or through the people that we knew, contacting pharmaceutical companies that were in related areas. And we would have researchers from Vascular Ehlers-Danlos join us, educate them about, here's what this condition is, here's why it's related to maybe some of the drugs that you already have. And so we had a number of good conversations, actually, none of which ended up through that kind of cold campaign turning into a research study. But along the same time, there have been a couple of biotech companies that have come through, and I'm sure you've talked about them. And for those who are knowledgeable about the industry or about this condition, have heard about the stuff that Acer Therapeutics has been doing and A2 Biopharma. And so we had proactively reached out to them when we heard that they were interested in the area. And a lot of what we've done is tried to provide the patient perspective to them, tried to provide the patients the other direction with information about what's going on. And so a lot of what we've done, so in that regard, and going back to the website, we've just launched now a new version of the website. We've made a bunch of improvements, well, to the look and feel of it, but we're adding new information, a lot of it which will be around the studies that may be coming. And so what we're doing now is, number one, making sure we're providing that information to patients so that they're getting it a lot of different ways. I know you guys are providing it, and Katie, you're eager to do it. I'm eager to do it. We want people to just know that this option is available. I think people are going to make their own decisions about whether they want to participate or not. But I think just having the option is something that's so exciting, because this was just in my mind, it was just for a while, it was just a pipe dream and something that we didn't know was going to happen. And so now we've been, we're engaging with these companies to better understand what are they doing, so that we can relay the information back to the patients, so that they understand, especially if there's different trials, what do I want to do? What is the difference? How am I going to be impacted? And is this something I should participate in? And the second piece is the genetic testing piece. So for those who are watching this and haven't been tested, an important prerequisite for participating in these studies will be having a known mutation that would qualify you for the study. And just having it, by the way, as I think people may or may not know, just having it doesn't mean you'll be a part of it if you want to. There's a process that they'll have to go through. But I think for those who are out there who think they have it, maybe they've had relatives who have this condition and they just haven't gotten tested because maybe they don't feel the need. We want to make it very easy to do that. Mm-hmm. and go through our website to do that. And it's part of the reason why we're trying to get lower costs during this period here, while we get people the ability to get that ahead of the trial. And so one other caveat I'll make on that point is, although we want to support through helping people get this, there's no guarantee that you won't need to be tested again. A lot of times when they do these trials, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, yeah, you've got this confirmation, but to standardize things, we want to have you tested through this lab. And so, but they will want to see a lot of times that you have the paperwork to say, yeah, I've already gotten it, because then it's just part of the process to make sure that you've got it once you're kind of in the trial and enrolled. So that's the couple ways that we're going to be helping to continue to stay connected to those companies, make sure we're relaying the information about how to participate, what the differences are, how you should think about it, and the genetic testing to make sure that everyone's set up for when those trials start enrolling.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, you touched on a point there that, even if you have a genetic test, there's a possibility that, you might not be eligible for the trial for another reason, or one of the trials. I mean, at this stage, the trial development is still like in development. So, there's no guarantee, but it's incredible work that you're doing to get people diagnosed, and to just, to have such a wonderful community of people who are engaged and want to help and want to be in research, or just, it's amazing. And to provide an extra resource on top of that to get people tested if they want to be eligible at all for one of these trials, I think that is such a great thing, because in order for trials to be significant, usually there has to be a good number of patients in them to show like statistical significance for the outcomes. So I think it's wonderful what you're doing. And I just cannot say how much I appreciate you and working with you over the last few years in the vEDS Collaborative. And now it's very exciting. It's a very exciting time to have vEDS. Like it's a strange thing to say, but there's so much going on in the last few years that it's just been building. that hope is on the horizon, and it feels really good, really, really good.
Yeah. And just to agree, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, when I first started into this community, tried to understand what there was out there, there were a lot of, and there have been a lot of the researchers that are around now have been around, and they've been doing really good work and spending a lot of time here. But when it came to, is there, the first questions that a lot of people ask when they get diagnosed, is there a treatment? What should I do? Their answers were really, were difficult to hear, that, there really isn't a treatment that we know, has been tested. There have been some studies, but I think many physicians, particularly in the US, there's no FDA approved drug. There's nothing that's passed that bar. And so it's kind of, disheartening to hear that, and to hear that, there's not much funding. There was funding at the NIH, this was probably 8 or 10 years ago, to study this, that went away. And there's sort of this lull where he said there are, again, still researchers doing really good work, but the idea of there being a treatment that someone with this condition could take that could make a difference seems so far away. And then as we've been having these conversations, and then over the past 2 years, so we first started talking to A2 Biopharma over 2 years ago, as we started to understand, as we knew the research that was going on at Johns Hopkins, and starting to hear about what they were doing, then it was called Rumpus Therapeutics, and just said, we want to be as helpful as possible, because again, every patient's going to make their own mind up. But I've been in the rooms, and you've been in those same rooms, Katie, with patients that talk about this research and the ability and whether or not they get to participate. And there's just unbelievable energy, because the idea that, yeah, there's something that it's been studied, it shows something promising enough, it's being taken into trials, and it's been, if we're talking about, both the trials that I'm thinking of that will probably come like soon have been demonstrated to be safe. These are safe drugs too. So there's an open question about how effective they are, but I think a lot of people are encouraged, and I'm encouraged by the fact that these companies are willing to invest all this money in trying to get to an answer. That's all we're really asking, and when it comes to, I don't really have a dog in this fight, as they say, to whether or not, these companies are successful, but I want to make it so that, and this is the message we've always been saying as we're talking to them, if you're interested in helping these patients and spending the money on researching and getting to answers, we want to make that as easy as possible. And just the fact that now this stuff, is very, you never know what's going to happen, but we're so close, this stuff is on the horizon. I think it's just so exciting, and I'm very optimistic and hopeful. And it's like you said, it's the most optimistic or hopeful I've been for the vEDS community.
Yeah, I think it is. I think the last time there's been a lot of hopeful moments in the last few years, and it just keeps getting better. And we've lost some beautiful, beautiful people, and still the hope is here. The hope is here. Things are right around the corner, it feels like, and they might not pan, it's possible that they might not pan out, but even that gets us closer to an answer. So I'm just absolutely thrilled. Thank you so much for everything that you do, Dave. Mm-hmm. Any final words for everybody? I just am so grateful for you.
Well, clearly the secret is out, that vEDS is not a secret. It's worth spending your time and your money researching this area. So that's got to be exciting, that it's a small and rare disease, but it's also got such a strong community and a lot of people. And now it's, being joined by those companies that are, putting money into researching it. So, thank you very much for the time. I'm looking forward to continuing to provide patients with more information on Fight vEDS. If you have, other things that you see that you'd like to learn more about, feel free to send a message through the contact us portion of the website, any sort of things you'd like to see more of. Like I said, if you've been diagnosed, I know we've helped at this point well over 1,000 people get information about getting tested, 100, well over 100, and probably a couple hundred that have gone on to get the testing, many of whom come back and say, hey, I had a positive diagnosis. What can I do about the trial, or other organizations that can help? Yeah, definitely stop by and let us know, and happy to help in any way that we can. So the whole purpose of the nonprofit is to be of service to those, with this condition, or are trying to figure out if they have it. So please let us know how we can help.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Thanks, Katie.